What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down what's going on with the overall market, how this may affect Tesla, and why tomorrow is going to be an absolutely massive day as we have President Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy meeting up with one another tomorrow to discuss the debt ceiling. We also have Tesla's shareholder meeting for tomorrow, so we have two big catalysts for Tesla for tomorrow, and I'm going to break down what the technicals are telling us as well as I give you guys my prediction about what could play out for the more medium term. Before I break anything down about this, though, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things real quick. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, whether it's $1 or $100, it's up to you. You're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. The offer ends within 2 weeks, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So looking at the markets, guys, I predicted that the market would try to get a bounce for today, and we could actually slow down intraday depending on the Fed speakers, but I was anticipating some green for the markets. SPY was up 0.35%. We got that green, rejecting off the resistance trend line right over here. So pretty decent day overall, but there's no guarantee that this will continue for tomorrow as the market's going to become very reactive to what happens with the debt ceiling. And then for the QQQ, same thing. I was anticipating a small bounce, a very small one. But the bottom line is, yes, this is a small bounce, of course. Could we continue to hold up for another few days? Sure, right? Sure, it could still happen. But for the more medium term, I'm still holding my word, and I'm saying that the odds are heavily favoring downside for the markets with the debt ceiling, with inflationary expectations, and the current technicals ahead of us. So for the medium term, as we approach June, excuse me, sorry guys. I do apologize about my cough too. Let me just mention that one of my roommates was sick and I ended up walking into them when I was about to exit, and we came very close to one another, and they may have actually passed the virus to me, but I'm doing okay so far. Hopefully it doesn't get worse. But anyways, like I was saying, I'm still anticipating downside for the more medium term. For the short term, it is possible for the market to hold up depending on these catalysts, depending on what happens with Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy. And then as far as Tesla goes, I was anticipating that Tesla would try to get a bounce too with the market, and we were getting some signals suggesting that. Tesla did try to bounce in the very beginning. During the pre-market, Tesla tried to hit 170, then it ended up failing. It came back down and pushed up again to almost 170. So we got a small, tiny little bounce. Not what I was hoping for. I thought Tesla would try to close very flat, if not a little bit in the green. Instead, it just ended up failing and it ended up just continuing to bleed. So now Tesla has relative weakness. Why is this happening? Why is Tesla so much weaker than many other ETFs out there? Well, one of the reasons would be we had some negative news coming out involving a lawsuit. And then if you look at Tesla's short interest, we saw a giant spike again. We saw about 31 million Tesla shares shorted on just Friday alone. So the shorts are starting to pile in. They're attacking Tesla, and this is what they tend to do. So even if technicals are telling us there could be a bounce, I'd be very careful because yes, there could be a bounce, but it might not be as strong as it could have been because of the manipulation. Okay, and that's a very important aspect of the markets. Tesla is a very manipulated stock, but it's not always extremely manipulated like on a day-to-day basis. There are just some instances and periods of time where the manipulation becomes worse. But anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets before I break down more information about what's going on with Tesla. Tesla is getting tighter and tighter and tighter right now. It's likely going to remain this way and make a big reactive move depending on how tomorrow goes. But what's happening for tomorrow? President Joe Biden is actually scheduled to leave for the G7 summit in Japan on Wednesday morning, which means early in the morning for Tuesday, he's going to have to get this meeting done with Kevin McCarthy, and they're going to be speaking about the whole debt ceiling. They're going to be working on coming up with a resolution. They're going to be working together to do so, and each of them have different mentalities and different goals at hand. You have Kevin McCarthy, who wants to attach spending reductions to a debt ceiling increase, whereas Biden has insisted that he would not negotiate over the debt limit initially, and now he's willing to do so, but he hasn't talked much about cutting spending. So very different ideas, are basically being played out. And there are more details I could go about, but I'm not going to talk too much about them. The bottom line is things right now are just all over the place, and politics could easily get in the way. Different sides could blame the other for a potential delay or anything like that. Uh, is there going to be default? I think it's very unlikely we're going to see anything like a default, and the odds are favoring that they're likely going to come up with some resolution, but it's likely going to happen during the last minute. At least that's what typically happens. Could the deadline be delayed? I mean, that's also a possibility. Typically, they just drag this out until the last minute, and the market may still panic as we approach that event. Wall Street clearly wants that to happen because they can make even more money by shorting the markets. Uh, in my opinion, it's very likely something like that is going to happen because each party could blame the other and try to gain their own power in the process of doing so. And by doing that, I mean, it could once again lead to more, apprehensive behaviors amongst investors. I mean, like I said before in my previous videos, consumer sentiment is starting to drop because of the situation, and the fear and greed index is currently at around like 59, so it has been dropping a bit. The market is becoming more fearful and more nervous. They're kind of on the edge about this. Excuse me. Biden said that he's optimistic about the deal, but McCarthy says that the White House is not being serious. So, like I said, I mean, lots of disagreements. They will eventually most likely come to a resolution, but for now, we might continue to see politics get in the way and more arguments going forward. So, for tomorrow, okay, they're going to be meeting in the morning, President Joe Biden and McCarthy. They're going to be talking about this. And when doing so, the market's going to have a big reaction. If we get some very positive news from this, the market may like it and hold up quite nicely. If not, we could see the market get rug pulled. So be very careful. Okay. I also want to add that we have lots of Fed speakers. We have Mester in the morning. The market has dropped off their words, but there are other times where it's remained flat. They tend to be kind of in the middle between hawkish and dovish. Then we have, this is going to be at about 8:15 a.m. Eastern time. And then very close to market open, we have Bostic again. The market tends to drop when they speak. So be very careful with Bostic. We could start off with a gap down in the markets again and then get a big reaction depending on what Joe Biden ends up doing. Then we also had the Fed Barr's testimony. The market tends to not like some of the things that Barr has said. He has caused some downside. Williams has been a little bit in the middle, and Logan has been in the middle, maybe a little bit more hawkish. So overall, the Fed speakers are more in the middle, if not, they're in the middle and also a little bit more hawkish overall, which could affect how the market moves depending on what they specifically say. But when it comes to what they say, it's not as impactful as before, like back in like 2022 and other instances like that. But once again, it's important to be prepared for this because the market could still react. Now, as far as Elon Musk and Tesla go, the news has come out that Musk is telling Tesla staff that he must approve all hirings again. And they're going to be working on this during the latest shareholder meeting. So, what are we expecting during this meeting? Well, the first thing to know is that they're going to be hosting some shareholders in Texas during the annual general meeting this week. And they're going to be voting on 5 proposals: the election of directors, approval of executive pay, and the company's auditors. Very, very important stuff for the company itself. Not as impactful as an event like Investor Day or like earnings, but it is still important. It's going to be taking place tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, which is about 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure you guys are prepared for that after the market closes. And they're going to be talking a lot about executive pay. Now, typically companies do this like every year. I believe Tesla does this only once every 3 years, which is considered to be a little bit controversial. They also are going to be having a vote against particular pays, and they're going to be talking about other things like that. They're going to be discussing new appointees. Who are they going to be appointing to certain positions for executives, and other things like that. I've been looking into this, and the whole pay situation, employee pay, is going to be very heavily negotiated because Tesla has seen in the past supply chain constraints, which aren't as impactful right now, but there are other macroeconomic factors still affecting them, as they discussed during their earnings. Now, Elon Musk also has talked about the recession. So this could also be in discussion for tomorrow, and how this could affect their ability to find more and more individuals to help bring the company to its best possible form. Tesla is doing very well, and I believe most of their executives will be appointed again, but there are specific details we'll have to learn about them. Now, on top of that, there was some talk about Elon Musk finding Linda, who is the new Twitter CEO. That was good news for Tesla. He may discuss something about that too. And with that said, we'll just have to wait and see how this goes. Once again, it's starting tomorrow after the market closes, so just get ready for it. There is news coming out that Tesla's being sued for limiting its car's battery capacities through the software update. Basically, Tesla has a large amount of capacity for its batteries. And because of these software updates, many people are arguing that Tesla's losing lots of miles. They're seeing very significant drops in the ranges from 12 to 30 miles after the software updates, and the charging time has been greatly affected by it. The Model S with the 85 kilowatt per hour battery packs were discontinued in 2016. This was a different model, of course, a different version of them with a different battery pack. And going forward, many people pointed out the same problem. Now, you could argue that this, in turn, is leading to some contentious claims. Electrek has stated again that this is very nostalgic in a way, but not the end of the world because there's not much that could truly be said yet. We're still waiting for the lawsuit to develop. If it's the truth, I'm hoping Tesla works hard to fix this problem. If it's not the truth, then let the truth set them free, right? It's really that simple. So we'll see how this goes. I just wanted to report this for you guys. Finally, when it comes to inventory levels, bad news is what I have for the Model 3. Inventory levels are going up again to well above the 800 mark. There's too many of them in inventory. We're starting to see a slowdown in demand for this model, and it's not a good sign for the company. However, the good news is we have been seeing the Model Y continuing to be bought up. It is seeing inventory levels go up a little bit, just a tiny bit, but overall they're still below 100, which is good. In the middle so far, this is very mixed for Tesla's earnings. I'm really hoping we get more deliveries, but for now, it's just very mixed. Now, SPY closed just above max pain, pushing above it. I predicted we'd see something like that, closing around 412. We actually closed around 413, so a little bit stronger than what I thought. And now for tomorrow, we have 411 and 412 for Wednesday as max pains. The put to call ratios are very low, 1.25 to 1.38, and then very low for Thursday at 1.15 because we have a crazy options expiration day for Friday. Overall, all of this is going to depend on big pieces of news. So we'll see if the market makers are able to hold the markets up. It's very likely they will try, but they're not going to be as worried about Tuesday through Thursday because there are very few options expiring. What matters most to them could be Friday. And if I were the market maker, I would try to save my powder, save as much energy as possible for this specific day. Max pain is suspiciously around 405, though. I find that very interesting. Now, as far as Tesla goes, the short interest has just exploded on Tesla. 31 million Tesla shares shorted in just one day, compared to seeing like 20 million and about 16 million, 17 million just a couple of days before. The shorts piled into Tesla. They're manipulating the price. Even though technicals were telling me a bounce could come, we got the bounce, but it was very small and weak. And now they're going to act absolutely relentless. So I want to warn you guys about this. These shorts are very strict. They're angry and they like to make money off Tesla by bringing the price down. Now, on top of that, looking at the seasonality and the price movement, during this period of time, we can actually go back to like this June period. We didn't get a very nice June, but there is a bit of a drop right before June. So that typically tells us that there's a change in the price action for the whole market. As we approach June, right, June tends to be a lot stronger. We tend to decrease a bit in May compared to like April. So May tends to not be the strongest months for Tesla, kind of in the middle, but June tends to be a lot better. Now, could this continue? It's a possibility, but I'm not leaning in that direction. I think as we approach June, there could be more downside. Tuesdays tend to be green about 51% of the time. And finally, Tesla tends to do better during the fourth, fifth, and possibly the 6th hours of the day, but more towards the fourth and fifth hours tend to be Tesla's best hours. Wedbush has reiterated that Tesla is going to outperform the market, as I mentioned yesterday, and the price price ratio is very flat for Tesla. So it is still not necessarily tanking, but it's not necessarily holding up the best either. If this continues to drop, it's going to show signs and more indicators that Tesla is getting weaker. Very, very unfortunate. Now, looking at the volume, 105 million, a little bit below average, and I don't really like to see Tesla drop on low volume. Now, let's talk about the prices. Now, because of what I mentioned about my potential illness, I'm not going to talk way too much about the prices right now. I'm going to keep this part a little bit short and just talk about a couple. Looking at SPY, this to me is looking in the middle between bullish and bearish, at least for the very short term. As I mentioned before, I'm more bearish for the medium term, for June, as we approach June. But until June comes, we have some time before then. The market might hold up a little bit longer depending on how things go. I think tomorrow the market might gap down. Excuse me. The market may gap down, try to push up to fill the gap, and just trade very sideways. We may see SPY back in the 411s, but then we're going to react to what Joe Biden does. If SPY breaks out and we break above 413.5, if Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy make a lot of progress, which I'm not really anticipating, but if that's the case, hypothetically, the market could start to push. If we get lots of bad news and there's no progress and the fear continues, we could see a rug pull. We could see this thing come all the way back to 410. If that fails to 410.7 and 410.23, those levels fail, then there's going to be 409. And we could start to break below this pennant. If that's the case, more bearish price action could come. Okay? Now, this is just a short term, right? It is possible for us to try to break out one more time and just chop around a bit. But for the medium term, I'm still favoring the bears. The bears still look like they have the edge because of the technical signals and also the bearish catalysts. I could change my mind, but we have to break some very important resistance zones and we need some bullish catalysts. So far, we're not really getting them. Right now, there's no major bullish catalyst. There's no major bullish catalyst to help the market pump very hard as of right now. And that's the reason, that's part of why I'm still favoring the bears based off these technicals. But I'm always open minded just in case something unexpected happens. But for now, I'm still favoring downside for the medium term and a big reaction depending on what happens tomorrow. The QQQ may gap down tomorrow and retest the support around this 325 area. But like I said, I mean, this is still forming a giant rising wedge looking more and more bearish. We don't have a bearish divergence just yet on the shorter time frames, but on the bigger time frames like the daily chart, I think we still have one developing. And what that tells me is we're in a topping process on the QQQ and the NASDAQ. We're likely going to see this thing just continue to hold up just a little bit depending on how tomorrow goes. And then eventually a big rug pull is coming that will drag the market down. Now for Coinbase, I just want to note that this thing looks more bearish to me. Depending on how tomorrow goes, I'm not too sure exactly how this is going to move tomorrow, but I see it coming down to 54 very, very soon. For Tesla, I think I just skipped over Tesla. Tesla had a very bearish looking candle for Friday. We saw some bearish continuations after that, but if you look at the 1 hour time frame, Tesla, it has a gap, I believe, around the 162s. I'm gonna have to double check that. There's that unfilled gap. And also, Tesla's just continuing to look weaker. It's beginning to chop around. It's trying to base around 163 to 164.5. This is where Tesla's next demand zone is going to be. Now, tomorrow is going to depend heavily on what happens tomorrow with Joe Biden. We got a tiny bounce on Tesla. You can see it right here. Tried to get to about 170 and it ended up just failing from there. The shorts are piling in, so be very careful. If we're bullish on Tesla, you need to see this thing break and hold 170. If we're bearish, it's going to break below 163. What am I seeing for now? I'm anticipating it's just going to chop around a bit and then just react to what happens tomorrow. It might gap down tomorrow into open, then try to push it up, then remain very, very sideways. Be open-minded. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. Be open-minded to anything. I'm anticipating some very boring price action at the beginning of the day, a bit of a gap down and just very sideways price action, but then I just don't really see how it's going to move depending on Joe Biden and the big meeting. Tesla might come down to about 164, maybe as low as 163. It's still a possibility if we do gap down. Try to bounce off of this, make its way all the way back to like 166 to 168, and just remain sideways, right, for the majority of the day. But depending on Joe Biden, like I said, that's going to affect this thing even more. NEO, if we're bullish, watch 8.5. If we're bearish, watch 7.9. It's going to break above or below those levels depending on tomorrow. And I'm still in the middle on NEO. It could go either way. There's not much of a divergence forming. It's not really overbought. It was due for this bounce, which I was talking about yesterday. I was correct about that. The dollar came down a bit, right? Down 0.24%, but it's holding up nicely. It's above the 1 hour 200 EMA. And on top of that, it's above 102. So that's a good sign for the dollar. If the dollar keeps breaking out, if it's going to keep going, that's going to turn bearish for the market. And the market's going to see a big rug pull because of this, right? We're getting some bullish signals on the dollar. If it keeps this up, it's going to become very, very bearish for the stock market. I'm warning you right now. It's cooling off a bit. It might retest this 50 EMA, but like I said, the dollar keeps going. That's going to become a bearish signal for the markets, and so far it's holding up nicely. As far as the HYG goes, the HYG was very flat. The smart money, if you want to use that word, they're basically the institutions and smart money are basically selling right now. They're very flat and indecisive. They're not really buying into the hype though. That's the big difference. Microsoft holding up okay so far, very, very flat. I'm anticipating it to continue this way. For the medium term, I'm more bearish on this. I think it's going to eventually come down to fill this gap. For the medium term, of course. On the daily chart, we're about to get across to run the MACD. That is a bearish signal. There's also a bearish divergence on it that has developed. I believe we're going to react to tomorrow, and then later on, downside is likely going to perpetuate. The VIX has a bullish divergence on the weekly charts. Also on the daily, I believe it's still developing. Because this thing was downtrending for quite a while, and this RSI is on an uptrend. On the weekly chart, the same thing is going on. There's a bullish divergence telling us that this thing is likely going to start pumping soon. If the VIX starts pumping, it's going to be because of the S&P 500. That is once again going to cause lots of volatility. The S&P 500 could cause the VIX to pump. The SQQQ on the weekly chart, it's continuing to downtrend, but there is a bullish divergence right here that has been developing, a big one. If this thing starts to break out, that's going to be bearish, right? Or at least it's going to be dictated by the Nasdaq and the QQQ. On the daily chart, there's a bullish divergence as well on the RSI and also on the MACD. Those both tell me there's going to be an increase in volatility, and the QQQ and the NASDAQ have downside coming. Why? Because Amazon's also on the verge of forming a top. There's a bearish divergence that's on the verge of forming. Let me just double check it. Yeah, there's a potential bearish divergence like right here. Amazon is continuing to make those higher highs, but if you look at the price, it's just not looking the best. I believe that this thing could hold up for a while. We have an indecision candle because of tomorrow. It might try to hold up for just a little bit longer. Maybe it tries to push up a little bit more, but eventually the rug pull should be coming. We have lots of gaps, and I still stand by what I said. I was wrong about Nvidia, guys. I admit that. I thought Nvidia would push up and then end up rejecting, coming down, and close around like 285, if not a little bit lower. Instead, this thing held up and continued to push throughout the majority of the day. The daily candle is looking strong, but there is a bearish divergence that's developing. What that tells me is that Nvidia could push up a little bit, could try to hold up and show some relative strength, but for the more medium term, there's likely still downside coming once the Nasdaq starts to downtrend and once the sell signals start to perpetuate. There's a bearish divergence on Apple stock. It's holding up okay. I do believe it's going to eventually fill this gap to the downside to the 166 area. It might pump a little bit, right? We might see this thing pump to about 174. Could hold up depending on what happens tomorrow. But overall, I do believe Apple is overextended and there is downside yet to come. And we are going to look for that retest of the 50 EMA on the daily chart. When is it going to happen? Maybe by the next month. But for now, just watch the charts carefully. Let's talk about Google before I end this video. I think Alibaba has earnings, by the way, so be ready for Alibaba. There's going to be a lot of volatility on that. Google, if it breaks below 115, it's going to fill the gap down to 112. So be careful with this. It is overextended and overbought. It might try to push up to almost 120 one more time before it continues to drop. That's a real possibility. But I would be very careful. I can't guarantee it's going to even bounce because it depends on the Fed speakers and Joe Biden for tomorrow. But the bigger move is likely going to be the downside, as this thing is overbought and it's very overextended. It might try to pump a little bit more before it continues to get rug pulled, coming all the way back down to 110 or so. Finally, last but not least, we have let me see, the 10-year treasury yield. This is up with the market, which is very ironic. Typically, when this thing goes up, the market's supposed to go down, right? And it's not really doing that. So this is like broken. It's very manipulated. I would be very careful. That's because the yields are moving very differently compared to before. But anyways, don't want to go into too many details about that. All I could say, guys, is tomorrow is very unpredictable. I don't know what's about to come with Biden and McCarthy. So be very careful, be very cautious, and remain calm, cool, and collected. However, for the medium term, the sell signals are still there, suggesting that the market has downside most likely to come by June time. Okay, so be open minded. This is not financial advice in any way, shape, or form, but I still thank you all so much for your support and thank you all so much for listening. All right, don't forget I have some merch for you guys around the comments section if you're interested in buying anything like a tank top, a hoodie, or a t-shirt that says buy the dipper to the moon. And also don't forget about the Weeble link. The offer ends in just 2 weeks. Get your 12 free stocks now. All right, guys, thank you. Tesla in the market to the moon as the long term is very, very bright. I'm anticipating Tesla to be a little bit more choppy temporarily. It's going to react to what happens to Joe Biden, so watch your levels very, very carefully. Lots of sideways price action, but overall, Tesla is looking more bearish to me for like the more medium term. I just want to give you guys a heads up about that. Why? Because of manipulation and also because of some negative news. That's the reason why manipulation is happening on the short side. So be open minded. Tesla to the moon as the long term is bright, and peace out.